Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. How's it going?
Good. How was your weekend?
It was good. Did a lot of moving this weekend, helping one of my family members move. So,
Nice.
kind of outside of the domain of my expertise, but I manage.
Well, maybe it'll become like a really brawny character, and um, you can do you can move houses as like a, side hustle or something. So
Yeah, yeah. In lieu of going to the gym, I could just go move people every weekend, maybe move a few
yeah.
pianos here and there. Maybe a piano moving business. It's lucrative.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, I get really strong doing that. Actually used to be a floor installer back in the day, and
Ooh, that's hard
uh,
on the knee.
ca- it's hard in the knees for sure. And then carrying like large rolls of carpet, um, that you'll get stronger than that. So,
Kind of like
yeah,
moving tires, right? Just like moving massive tires, truck tires across the field. Isn't that what they do to train in the NFL? They like
yeah,
carry rolls of
yeah.
carpet. Yeah.
That's hilarious. Well, speaking of moving, so to speak, this week we're going to talk about something that we're asked quite a bit. Data scientists often ask us, how do I become a data engineer? So this Monday morning data chat is going to focus on if you're an existing data scientist and you want to move into the data engineering profession, what are some reasons why you'd want to do so? What are some of our tips for doing that? I think you and I have a unique perspective in this since we have been data scientists and are now mainly doing data engineering work.
Yeah, and I think we envision this being a part of the series because we've talked about how do you transition if you're a software developer. We talk to people who are in academia and are looking at getting into data. And so we'll probably have a couple of these episodes about getting into data engineering from various backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so what was your experience moving from data science to data engineering?
Let's see. I mean, I made that transition fairly quickly after getting into data science, and it's partially because when I got into data science, there was fairly limited infrastructure where I was working. And so I just ended up working on a lot of data engineering type problems. First, kind of on a local level, right? Meaning on a laptop. So I don't consider things you do just on a laptop to be true data engineering, but it's kind of data engineering adjacent because as soon as you move that into a managed environment, as soon as you start orchestrating and doing proper data ops practices, then it becomes data engineering. So that was the beginning of it, just working, to solve data science problems, but having to do so much heavy lifting to actually get the data and transform it and extract the features I was interested in. And so gradually, I just became the go-to person for a lot of data engineering issues. And then I started working on more infrastructure, and then I worked on a couple of different cloud projects involving data engineering. And so that was pretty much my transition. So it wasn't like I spent 10 years in data science before making this transition, which I think that's kind of what your experience was.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the data analytics, data science space for a really long time, and I think my interest in data engineering is more out of necessity. I was working at a very early machine learning startup, and I would say back in the day, this is the early 2010s, it was a much different situation versus now, where you can find libraries galore to help you with seemingly whatever problem you're faced with. Back then, there really wasn't a lot in terms of frameworks at all, or best practices, or anything, right? So you kind of had to invent this stuff as you went along. So I mean, I remember building machine learning pipelines, and things of that nature. And I think that's what I realized was data engineering is incredibly useful. And I think at that time, incredibly undervalued. I don't even think it was called data engineering back then. Um, and the data science was actually really difficult, right? And the difficulty wasn't so much in the algorithms piece, although I would say that is difficult, but the more labor intensive work was always everything surrounding machine learning, right? So
Yeah.
pipelines, storage, everything else. And so I figured, if I'm going to work on machine learning, it might be a good idea to actually work on the periphery of it and solve these other problems, which would in turn help people be more productive in data science. I guess when you and I met, we had very similar views on this and liked it so much we started a company around it. So,
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's the 75-25 rule that we hear all the time, which is, if you're a data scientist, you're probably going to spend 75% of your time just preparing and transforming data, making it clean, getting it to a stage where it's actually useful. And I think our thought was, well, why don't we more focus on automating that process so that your data scientists become much, much more productive in their jobs and don't have to mess around so much with just the basic transformation infrastructure steps. And on top of that, get a lot of processes off of laptops into a more like productionized DevOps type of environment where everything becomes much more efficient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are some good motivations, and it's something I know we see all the time. Teams of data scientists are working, on notebooks on their laptops. The models in these notebooks may or may not see the light of day. And I think, along the way, it was interesting because we started uncovering other things that people are, other pain points, right? So even business intelligence, something that seemingly should have been solved and done by a lot of companies, still, I think we still have this notion that most companies are barely doing BI, let alone AI, right? And that tends to be our experiences. Even the lower hanging fruit like BI still needs to be addressed. But that's also a part of the progression towards doing, machine learning and data science. If you don't have good analytics around your data, it's going to be really hard to do machine learning on that data. So.
Yeah, that's just it. I mean, we see data quality issues all the time that prevent analysts from realizing accurate business intelligence, let alone trying to do any real data science or design correct models.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's for sure. And the silver lining is I think that as data engineering is becoming more prevalent in organizations, I think we're starting to see some wins and companies, going up the adoption curve and maturity scale, and hopefully very soon, incorporating machine learning into their workflows. That's definitely, I think, more realistic than it was even a couple of years ago.
Right. Yeah, and I think we should point out here that it's a continuum, right? It's not like everyone is going to jump out of being a data scientist and suddenly become a pure data engineer. Even if most of your work is data science, I think adopting data engineering practices is just going to make your job and your company and your life better. You'll just be able to have a lot more impact on the company and design better models by adopting good, scalable practices and data ops type practices as well.
Mm-hmm. I think it deserves some clarification here too. There's the notion of data engineering. There's also the notion of machine learning engineering. In some cases, like all terms in the data field right now, I think there's definitely some overlap. I do see data engineers working on what would be considered machine learning engineering type problems. I would say that, from a definition standpoint, as your team grows, it makes a lot more sense to kind of more fine tune titles and roles and everything. But just like the term data science is very, I would say, overarching at this point to the, I could make an argument that it's lost a lot of specific value or meaning. The same thing is happening with data engineering. Roles that used to be like BI engineering, for example, is now data engineering, and a bunch of roles, from even 20 years ago are now, kind of falling in line with data engineering. I think at the end of the day, as long as you're, providing value to the organization in terms of better engineering, infrastructure, architectures, and that sort of thing, that tends to be the role that encompasses a data engineer. And I think, like all titles, you're going to start seeing more kind of bifurcation, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. So machine learning engineering, I think, will inevitably be its own separate title and discipline. I mean, it already kind of is, but it'll become more so in the future. So just want to make that clarification. But
yeah, I think most organizations of any scale are going to benefit from specializations, and the practitioners will benefit too by really being able to focus on a particular skill set and also to stay on top of the new developments and technologies within that skill set. I mean, this realm of data changes so fast, whether we're talking about TensorFlow or new database technologies or orchestration technologies. Every month there are new things released, and if you're not specializing, then you can't really stay on top of best practices. It's simply not possible. And so, yeah, I think it's just like the assembly line from, the turn of the 20th century, and like having workers specialize in a particular area and become really good at that is just going to benefit your company.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that actually, sort of along this line,
Yeah.
data scientists, I hold a very contrarian opinion about data science. I think that the term data science, it's become so overloaded. You're actually going to start seeing, I would say, the role of a data scientist becoming maybe three major areas. So, like, again, algorithms researcher. You might have a machine learning engineer, data engineer. Then you're going to have somebody who's applying their data skills with domain expertise, right? And so that used to be called an analyst. But now with the advent of machine learning, call it whatever you will. But I see the role of data science sort of breaking into these areas where it's sort of for like domain focused, value from data, and then engineering, and then maybe research. So if you're a data scientist right now and you're looking for a new field, it may just sort of happen organically in some ways. So
yeah, depending on the needs of your current job and where you'd like
yep.
to see your career go. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. One quick note. I mean, we often hear about data teams and maybe the like ratios for data engineers to data scientists. You want to elaborate on that at all?
Yeah. So it was really just in the last 2 years or so that I started to hear the ratio 3 to 1 thrown out. So in other words, you need about 3 data engineers for every data scientist that you're going to hire. And what happens if you don't have that ratio is that your data scientists just end up spending a lot of time on data engineering type problems, which might not be the most efficient use of their time because they're not specialists, right? And so it's good to have a foundation of specialists who can really get the data transformed, manage orchestration, manage pipelines, and really work hand in hand with the data scientists and even contribute to the development of algorithms, but be the specialists in data engineering so that the data scientists can think about the problems that they're really trained in.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, continue.
I suspect, frankly, I suspect companies like Google and Facebook internally have been doing this for a long, long time. I mean, Google has always focused a lot on data engineering. Think about the MapReduce papers and the data flow papers. I mean, they've been publishing papers on core data engineering problems since the foundation of the company. But it took a while for that knowledge to disseminate out to the rest of the world. And I think it's still happening right now. And I think that's partially because people are much more interested in, quote unquote, AI and exciting algorithms than they are on pipelines and core technologies that really enable that. But once you get past the buzzwords, it's like, okay, how am I really going to make this system work? And that's where you need this kind of ratio of data engineering to data science.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. What are some tips that we should discuss for somebody for data scientists who wants to become a data engineer?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we talked about methods for studying, right? That's a key thing. If you want to start developing this skill set before you apply for a job, then there's kind of a sequence of things that you should study to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that maybe some things, a common criticism of data scientists is that they can't write code very well. I would say, a big suggestion is learn proper software engineering best practices, right? Like learn how to write production grade code. There are plenty of great resources, great books, and tutorials online about this subject. So, but even books like The Pragmatic Programmer, I would say is an excellent resource for anyone who's writing code, clean code, other books like that. Have been sort of mainstays of, the software engineering world for a long time. And, learning how to write good code, I think is a really good practice. Especially if you're used to just writing, scripts in a Jupyter notebook, for example, right? There's a big difference between doing that and writing code that, it's going to be productionized. So that would be one place I would highly recommend focusing a lot of attention. Learning things like DevOps, right? And then extending that into data ops would be another area of study. There's a variety of good books. A specific data engineering book that I highly recommend over and over is Designing Data Intensive Applications by Martin Kleppman. It came out, I think, in 2017. but the book is, I think, a rarity in the technical book space where it hasn't lost a lot of its luster. Normally, when you get tech books, there's an expiration date on the material.
Yeah.
This book did a really good job at, the author did a really good job at making this book so that it was pretty timeless in a lot of ways. There's also, I would say, go to meetups. That's another thing. There's a lot of virtual meetups now.
Yeah.
Learn from people, network with people to understand what they're doing.
And it's really all about networking. I mean, in terms
Yeah.
of getting into a new profession in the tech industry, we we actually were on a call last week, and there was a long discussion about resumes. And part of my thought around that discussion was like, well, maybe when we focus on resumes, we're kind of focusing on the wrong thing. Resumes are a very difficult way for me to communicate who I am, and they're a very difficult way for a hiring manager to understand who I am. And communicating with people at a meetup and having extended discussions about technology and about practices really lets them know what you're actually capable of. And then ideally, it gets to the point where you're solving each other's problems. You know, you bring problems to each other, and then they know, okay, this person is good to work with. They have an engineering mindset, even if they need to learn new things about data engineering to become a good data engineer. I know that I can train them to be a great data engineer on my team. And so, yeah, definitely go to meetups, and any way you can network and exchange ideas with other people is going to help you to get into the profession.
For sure. Yeah, that's a good point. Networking is, I think, super underrated, and I would almost argue the most valuable thing you could do with your time as a professional in general, right? Like that's just like general career advice. Is networking is so central to your growth, whether if it's at your current company or at another company or maybe your own company someday. But all of these rely on having a network of people that you can get inspiration from, learn from, maybe work with, and so forth. So,
Yeah, and I think, I mean, part of the problem with networking is that a lot of tech professionals view it as kind of unsavory, right? It's like, oh, I'm just going out there to socialize, but I'm just trying to get ahead. I'm really out there for myself, and I don't care about anyone else. And it just makes me feel kind of gross when I do it. And I think if you kind of reorient your mindset around networking and say, you know what, I'm here to help other people and to share my ideas, and then other things will come back to you. It becomes a much more positive experience if you go out and try to contribute instead of just going out there trying to get ahead. But you'll still help your career this way. In fact,
yeah,
probably,
I mean,
yeah,
yeah, for sure. I mean, the thing with, I would say, networking and learning in general is that it's not a zero-sum game, right? There are some, so don't approach it transactionally. And if you do, you'll get the results that being transactional will get you. But um, exchanging ideas, growing a network of people who can help you in your career is um, it's multiplicative, right? And there's nothing zero sum about it. It's not like because you and I are friends and I get 10 more friends, it doesn't necessarily make our relationship any different. In fact, I would say it enhances it in a way because now we have these other 10 people that we can learn from and get inspiration from that we didn't have before. It's you only grow as you expose yourself to new ideas and challenge your own thinking. And I think coming from a data science background into data engineering, you're going to be challenging your thinking a lot, actually. It's a completely different, I wouldn't say a completely different mindset, but they're different enough that it could be slightly jarring, for example. Like you're not going to be writing, you're not going to be throwing the machine learning hammer at every nail that pops up anymore. Your perspective is going to broaden quite a bit to think about things like workflows and pipelines and storage and all these other things that you sort of took for granted before. So
yeah. And I would say on top of the kind of generalities, pick a few data engineering frameworks that you're interested in and learn them extremely well. And what I mean is don't just learn how to write code in those frameworks, learn about the internals of the frameworks. Because it turns out that as a data engineer, even if you aren't standing up your own Spark clusters, you really need to understand how Spark works under the hood in order to performance tune it. And so if you're interested in Spark, go learn about Spark, but not just how to write code, but what Spark is doing under the covers and how to think about performance and what's going to cause it to crash and what's going to cause it to perform well. Same thing, if you're interested in orchestration, then go learn about Airflow, but learn about all the primitives of Airflow and all the constructs and how the different pieces work and what the scheduler is and what an Airflow executor is, how the web interface works, what the backend database does. And if you do that, first of all, you'll be learning that framework, but you'll also be developing an engineering mindset, which is what I want to see in a potential data engineer, that they know how to investigate and solve problems and understand the details in order to deliver value to the data scientists in the company.
Yeah, and these are fine points. And I think it also loops us back to one area that I don't think we touched on, which is find an area of data engineering that you find that you're willing to invest a lot of time into. There are so many different subsections of data engineering that it's impossible to really master all of them, I would say. Be cognizant of the general data lifecycle, as it moves through, from ingestion all the way to maybe a machine learning model, but pick an area that is very, I would say, uniquely interesting to you and that you can stick with researching. So if it's like streaming, for example, learn about all the paradigms in streaming, understand the technologies, like you said, in and out. And I think what you're going to find is there's baseline concepts that sort of underpin a lot of these different paradigms in data engineering. And you'll also find that a lot of these concepts are fairly old, actually. And so by taking the time to understand what's going on under the hood, you start being able to interconnect all these different ideas together and all these, different practices that people had, invented at one time or another. And I think that also makes you, a much better practitioner in data in general. When you can start connecting the dots, that's a very powerful skill. And it just comes through investing a lot of time into experimenting and reading and applying it in real world situations. But again, don't boil the ocean. Pick an area that you're interested in.
Yeah. And I guess, another piece of advice we were going to give beyond the networking and getting into technical details, how do you actually make that leap? And so I kind of had two ideas. You might have a couple of ideas, but one transition that I see happen a lot is that someone is a data scientist, but there's a data engineering need within their company. And so they just start working on the data engineering need, and they effectively become the data engineers that way. So for example, the company is transitioning to a new database technology. They take the lead in doing that. Maybe they're transitioning to Snowflake or BigQuery, but they become the team lead and just manage that transition and work with the data scientists and other engineers on it. Or a company might adopt Airflow, and they'll just take the lead, learn all about Airflow, and train everyone else to do it. And they become a data engineer that way. Another way of transitioning is to find a sponsor somewhere. And so it could be at a different company, it could be at your current company, but find a data engineer who understands your talent, understands what you're capable of, but knows that you're a little raw still. You haven't learned the ins and outs of whatever they're interested in, but is willing to take a risk on you and say, yeah, I know that you're smart, you have an engineering mindset, and you can learn this, and so you can be on my team, and I'll help you to get up to speed. Sponsorship in your career is huge, regardless of what you're doing, whether it's data engineering, data science, or software development.
Big time, for sure. And again, that all comes back to the networking piece. It's such a common piece of advice that we give everybody, right? Like, know people. It's amazing how many people, if you show initiative, I think it's just amazing how many people are willing to vouch for you and maybe sponsor you and help you in your career, right? That's there's a lot of, there's just, I would say, untold value in that, and that's how you're going to find your sponsor. It also comes down to asking around the company too, like, are there opportunities where I can grow in data engineering, for example, right? If you don't ask, you may not find out. So you just gotta be willing to put yourself out there, and it could be a scary thing too, because you're known as the data scientist, right? And but at the end of the day, you're the person in charge of your career and nobody else. And you got to treat yourself as a business in a lot of ways, where if you're going to go in a direction, you have to be very deliberate with your actions. Nobody's going to take the time out of their day, to intentionally move you along a career if they don't see that you're also taking steps and being intentional and deliberate with your actions in your career.
Yeah. And once we get back to a time where you can have lunch with people or grab coffee, just find out who the people are on these teams that you're interested in and get to know them. And at some point, you may find out that they have an opening on their team, and there might be an opportunity to just join their team. Even now, in the age of Zoom, just try to get on Zoom calls with people and talk for 10 minutes and find out what they're up to, and they can find out what you're up to and find out what your common interests are. And you may find opportunities that way. And in fact, in the age of remote work, you can do that all over the country. It's very easy to reach out to someone on LinkedIn, and people want to talk to each other and find out what's going on.
Oh yeah, I have this happen all the time. LinkedIn messages, can I pick your brain about how to become a data engineer?
Right.
I get lots of messages like this every week.
Yeah.
And, in a lot of cases, I'm happy to answer them because I know that if this person has taken the time to reach out to me and shows a genuine curiosity and progress in their career, the least I can do is respond to them with my advice and my opinions, and, they can do what they want with it. If I see somebody has taken some initiative and they want to, maybe jump on a quick Zoom call, so they can, get some more advice, happy to do that too, within reason, obviously. If you're going to talk to somebody, obviously have a plan about what you want to talk about, maybe set an agenda. And I would say also, don't be an asshole.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If you're going to ask somebody for advice, be willing to take that advice and put it to use. The thing that pisses people like me off, who get asked a lot of questions, and I'm sure you do too, and you give advice, and then you realize the person just didn't do anything with it, right? They're back to square one, doing what they did, and then they just wasted their time and yours. So
yeah, the biggest gratification you get from helping out someone else is seeing them succeed. And so if you give them advice and they're excited about it, and then you see them actually do something with it, you see them investigate a job offer, you get a job offer based on your recommendation, that's really exciting. So yeah, make sure you're serious before you're asking this advice, and be quick about it. In other words, even a 5-minute call, a 10-minute call, you can get a lot of good advice without taking too much of someone's time.
Yeah, definitely. And again, and on the be serious note too, understand that the data world is very small, right? And so you don't want to be known as somebody who is an asshole.
Right.
There's no better way, I think, to develop a reputation of, that may not be that desirable for you, by wasting people's time, and basically being self-serving, right? But then maybe taking advice and not doing anything with it. That kind of stuff. It's kind of a general rule of like human behaviors. Like, it's about reciprocation and it's about respect. So I would say, have a plan when you talk to people, but do talk to people as well. I would say if you're serious about this, definitely talk to people. Don't let what we're saying scare you away. Just what we're saying is people like us are very busy, and just respect our time, and we'll respect, you as well. And
right. But the reality is that we both had lots of sponsors throughout our careers that helped us to succeed. And we had lots of sponsors when we went into business. We probably wouldn't have made it past 6 months without having lots of people at various partner companies who said, hey, come work with us, come work with these customers. We think you do good work and we're going to help you out.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, the golden rule is just reputation's everything, and as Warren Buffett says, it takes a lifetime to build a reputation and 15 minutes to destroy it. So, I would say, just as a general piece of career advice, just make sure you're doing everything to maximize your reputational capital at all times, and keep building that reserve of reputational capital. There's no better way to, switch industries, for example, or switch career paths. If you have a great reputation and people trust that you are a person who has integrity and character and are great to work with, your ability to move, between different careers, I think is greatly, it's improved quite a bit. So
yeah, and be a contributor. That means give talks. That would be the number one thing I'd say, and especially now with meetups being so national, just find any meetup you're interested in, find a topic that they'd like to talk about and they want you to talk about, and give a talk. And you're promoting your own career, but you're also contributing to that community.
Yeah, Slack groups is another one. There's lots of good Slack groups. Locally Optimistic is one I highly recommend. Just you can learn a lot from various professionals, throughout the world now. So, what COVID has done is I think it shrunk the data world quite a bit. And I think that's, one of the positive things that's come out of COVID. So, you can talk to anybody around the world, and learn from them. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a good place to stop. So anyway, hopefully, again, if you're a data scientist looking to become a data engineer, hopefully this was a helpful video for you. And like Matt said, we'll have, I think, further discussions on, data scientists to data engineering, as well as other topics, academics to data engineering, software engineers to data engineers, and so forth. So expect some more data chats about that, and we'll catch you next Monday. So,
well, and honestly, we'll probably also talk about how to get into data science at some point. I mean,
yeah, that's a good one, actually.
We don't
Yeah,
work in that quite as much as we used to, but we're certainly familiar with the field and the process of getting started in a career. So,
yeah, for sure, that's a good call. Awesome, Matt. Well, talk to you next Monday. So,
take care. Talk to you soon.
All right.